Mark Nichols, CEO of Xeros Technology Group. Thank you for joining us today. Xeros Technology Group has created these exciting and revolutionary technologies that have this power to save water and reduce microplastic pollution. So your technologies are called Xorb, Xdrum, and Xfiltra. Could you tell us a little bit about these and what they do?
They do discreetly and distinctly different things. We have Xorbs and Xdrum. They work in combination to, as you say, radically reduce water in the manufacture of apparel and also in the laundering of garments, both in commercial laundries and in the home. And the Xorbs, and I've got an example of these here, Xorbs effectively take water out of those processes. In so doing, they make the remaining water more effective. You can use less chemistry in that area as well. And also it works at ambient temperatures, so we take out energy. So in combination, those two things are very good in terms of improving, as they say, the sustainability, but quite clearly, there's a very, very significant cost benefit as well. So that's very virtuous in combination. And the other thing that they do in those two applications, as they say, apparel, and also in the laundering of garments, is to actually improve outcomes as well. So in the case of laundering of garments, your clothes look better and for longer by using our technologies. And that's one of our technologies working in combination. The other one, as you rightly point out, is somewhat different. That is our XFiltra technology. Our XFiltra technology is used to reduce microplastics. Now, I think a number of people will become increasingly aware, or have become increasingly aware of the fact that when you launder your garments, you're actually putting, or we are putting, a lot of small plastic pieces into our rivers and oceans. And in fact, 35% of the world's primary microplastic pollution comes from the clothes that we wash on a daily basis. And what we've been doing at Xeros for 4 years is to develop our Xfiltra solution, which works inside a washing machine. And what it does, it has the capacity to reduce 99% of the plastics that we emit from our clothes into the effluent stream, into those rivers and oceans. And I've got a small desktop version here. And simply this goes inside a washing machine when it's manufactured. And just as you would empty your fibers from your tumble dryer on an ongoing basis, all you do is do exactly the same with this device inside your washing machine. And so that's very simple, low cost, effective way of reducing one of our largest sources of microplastic pollution. So there are our technologies. We've got Xorb, Xdrum working in combination in the manufacture of garments and also in the subsequent laundering thereof, so across their life cycle. And then we've got our separate platform technology, which is Xfiltra, which is reducing microplastic particle effluent. And so what we have, major technologies, broadly deployable, and of course, not only bringing benefits in sustainability, but cost. And that's quite an important combination.
And you've had a pretty interesting recent development journey as a company. So could you just tell us a little bit about what the key milestones have been of late?
Yeah, so we're a company with quite a long history. But in 2017, we set our stall out and said, we are going to become an asset-light, IP-rich licensing company. And we needed proof whereby people would accept those technologies that I've just described. And we actually entered into a number of markets to do that. But what's happened most recently is that we've convinced a number of those areas in which we are interested in from an applications perspective in terms of the manufacture of garments, number one, and number two, in their subsequent laundering. We've now have in place licensing agreements with major equipment manufacturers in those areas. And we have signed an agreement with the largest garment equipment manufacturing company in South Asia. We have signed also an agreement with the largest commercial laundry equipment company in South Asia, and also the equivalent in China. And last but by no means least, we've also signed a domestic laundry licensing deal with the largest domestic washing machine manufacturer in India. So after quite a long journey, but a recent one since 2017, we've had a number of major milestones in terms of proof of the technology as witnessed by the agreements that we've just signed. So it's an important recent history for us, but one we intend to build on significantly, because quite clearly we're addressing two countries in that regard, China and India, but we have significant plans to expand thereof on a geographic basis, but clearly in a measured sequencing thereof.
Mm. And in terms of, obviously you have this global outlook and there's a real big purpose-led goals around resource life, around obviously the revolutionary technology that you talked about. And you've got an aim to deliver on these big purpose goals by 2022, which, I mean, this is really exciting from an environmental point of view at the very least. So how are you progressing with these?
Yeah, so it's the nature of what we do. It underpins everything that we do. Our core purpose is to radically improve the sustainability of water intensive processes, both in industry and the home.
Mm-hmm.
And that underlies and underpins, as I say, everything that we do. And I think the world has come to understand that water is not a limitless resource. And as a consequence of that, we are now finding immense water stress. And it's no mistake we've gone to India and China first, because they are two great examples of such water stress. But where we are today is that we are clearly on trend for a complete secular demand that just simply won't go away. Is that with the increase in the number of people on our planet and the increase in terms of their GDP, the demands they have for water increase, and thus water stress increases. And so our whole capacity is about taking billions of liters of water from processes to people. And that is the trend that we have to serve, not just as Xeros in terms of our technology, but as a broader mission that we have. And quite clearly, we are very, very supportive in terms of a number of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as well. So that's our whole raison d'etre. We are on our way to start meeting that objective of saving billions of liters of water and putting it in the hands of people, as I say, instead of industrial processes. And the start for us is these 4 contracts, which will start to deliver those kind of water benefits during increasingly 2021 and 2022. And as I said before, as we add licenses to us, our sustainability mission becomes more broadly implemented.
Hmm. And with that in mind, I mean, because obviously you've said that these purpose-led goals really underpin everything that you do. So have you ever found that there's a tension between your sustainability goals and your commercial returns for your development partners? Has there ever been that tension? If so, how do you manage them, or has there ever been that tension at all?
So the tension in sustainability, which is why that is such a good question, the tension in sustainability is that the world does not want to pay an extra dollar or pound for it. It would like sustainability at the same cost or lower cost. And we all understand that the large industries which serve us today, which pay dividends to pensioners, and an important part of our economic fabric today, cannot implement technologies which materially increase their costs and thereby increase prices and therefore potentially reduce demand and potentially impact their appeal to the consumer on the price front. Where we are in Xeros is that we have the ability and do increase that sustainability quite radically. But as clearly, if we reduce those inputs, and we talked about water and we talked about energy and we talk about chemistry, whilst having a better product outcome, we start to balance that equation by saying you can have sustainability with a lower cost base. And the lower cost base is sufficient on three levels. One, to provide those in the value chain with a reduced cost, but also potentially for consumers to have a reduced cost from it. But also there's enough in it for Xeros to generate a return on its intellectual property, and therefore thereby us getting a return for our investors. So that's probably, I can't say it's unique, but what I can say, it's an important facet in terms of our technology to provide sustainability at a lower cost, but without compromise and in fact enhancing product and process outcomes. So that's really what we think is the magic and the differentiation in our technologies.
You've obviously mentioned your licensing agreements with partners in China and India. I mean, these account for something like 40% of the world's water consumption. So since you've signed those agreements, how have those relationships been developing? And are you beginning to see that these territories are realizing the environmental benefits?
It's no surprise that we have signed agreements in India and China. As you say, they are very substantial consumers of the world's water supplies, but they've also got about a third-ish of the world's population. And so they have a need, we have the ability to supply that need, and we're working in every case with the leading original equipment manufacturers, OEMs in those countries. And as a consequence of that, we've got companies who are our licensees who can make a broad implementation of our technologies. And they are all working with significant energy and significant pace to bring our technologies into those markets, simply because the demands are there. Now, in a lot of the world, people don't really get forced into change until they have impacts upon them which become very noticeable. And quite clearly in those countries, water stress is very, very noticeable. And as a consequence, the deployment rates, we believe, and our partners believe, will be quite quick and are indeed planned to be. Now, if we were then to consider other parts of the world who currently believe that they have a situation of greater comfort in terms of water availability, it is only a matter of time before that equation becomes more stressed. And the way the world manages its stress of water is to put the price up. The regulatory frameworks and mechanisms that exist, for example, in China, is to force change through technology and reduction in consumption by managing pricing. And you may be surprised to hear, but the world's most expensive water pricing for commercial applications in the world now is China, which is reflective of the stress that they're under. And their water pricing is now equivalent to that you see on the western coast of the United States. So quite simply, the trends are going to continue, but quite sensibly, we will approach the markets that have the most demand and the most economic benefits to accrue in the short term.
So I think it'd be fair to say that, you know, your partners are working with you to create an industry benchmark.
Yes, I mean, we've spent a lot of time in our own technology center here in the UK with industrial sized machines, both in the garment finishing world and the commercial laundry world and the domestic laundry world. And what we have done is to take down the consumption per kilo in terms of liters of water for each one of those applications to world leading standards. And not only the world leading standards, but we're also doing it with a low cost conversion. The economic cost of our conversion to these world lowest rates of water consumption per unit of output, the cost is very, very low. And therefore the payback periods are very, very attractive. So yes, we have managed to create technologies which we believe should be the defining standards to be used. And I'm very pleased to see that the European Union has put in place regulations that it hopes to see in place, as I say, by the end of 2025, which presents a whole new set of standards for use of appliances within the home, specifically washing machines. And I'm delighted to say that the standards that are being aspired to are those that we can already achieve. So the standards will continue to increase and increase, and our role is always to be ahead of them. We've not finished our development, but we're certainly already at the vanguard in terms of the standards that are required or will be required.
And I mean, to just continue that point, over the past year, Xeros has been raising funds not only to execute its current contracts and agreements, but also to add in other targeted geographies, as you say. You mentioned the European Union there. So, what are your main motivations for these various new territories that you're entering, and how's that developing?
Yeah, we obviously have an applications strategy, and I've talked about those in terms of laundering, apparel, and also microparticle filtration. So we've got those segments or the verticals set from an application perspective, but quite clearly we have our map, our geographic map, in terms of those steps that we intend to take. Now, in this current year, 2020, we obviously have the contracts that I referred to earlier, needing to implement them, getting them on the first base, and an ability to rapidly grow those in 2021. And in spite of COVID, we're still very confident that those plans that we had will mean that we're in those markets substantively at the end of this year with high growth next. In terms of our commercial laundry market, the Europe and the US is something that we have in our minds in terms of a licensing sequence, Europe first and then the US. In our apparel applications, it's easy to understand that the centers of gravity or the density in terms of manufacturing companies are in discrete areas on the planet. Now, we went to South Asia first there because it is a very, very high volume production hub for the apparel market. The others are Turkey, China, East Asia, and parts of Europe, Mexico, and Brazil. Now, we haven't been specific in terms of the next countries that we're going to in that regard, but we have a firm view in our minds that all those territories will be covered within a 3-4 year time frame, and the sequencing will be within the larger manufacturing territories. But most importantly, as we do with all of our licensees or licensing arrangements in our commercial applications, is that we have to have the right partner. And with Ramsons in South Asia, we had that. And quite clearly, we're going through a process of understanding who would be the right licensed partner in those other territories. So that's what you'll see in terms of a commercial laundry development and a commercial apparel applications. Domestic laundry, we're already in India. We have a joint development agreement with the second largest manufacturer of domestic washing machines in the world, which is about trying to get to a design which would be appropriate for that market and be commercially acceptable in that market. And we're in discussions with other major domestic laundry manufacturers to see whether other parts of the world would benefit from our technology. So you will hopefully see other announcements in that regard as we expand there. And then in our XFiltra technology, we don't have a geographic strategy with our XFiltra technology. There's 110-ish million washing machines manufactured every year. That means there's about 750 million machines out there putting microplastics into the rivers and oceans that we have. Those machine rates will increase as GDP per capita increases in India, China, and elsewhere. Demands for washing machines go up. There won't be an increase in Europe and the US, but the total installed base of washing machines will go up. Our technology, we believe in XFiltra, will become the de facto standard for use inside a washing machine, given its low cost, its efficiency, ease to incorporate, ease to use. And it would be totally wrong for us to license that to any one OEM. And I can say that we are in active discussions and under NDAs with some of the world's largest washing machine manufacturers with regard to meeting the needs and the legislation that's coming forth to have those in our domestic washing machines. So no geographic strategy there, because it would be quite wrong of us to have one OEM with that technology to the detriment of others. And the model there that we have, and we put out in the public domain, is that we would seek a small royalty for every time our technology was used in terms of a filtration device inside one of those washing machines. And just to give you a characterization of that, the French government has said that every single washing machine sold in France by the end of 2025 will have a microparticle filtration device within it. Now, that's a small market, but it might be a small market, but it's 2.4 million machines sold every year. So there's a compare and contrast in terms of our geographic steps that we intend to take across the different platforms that we've got.
I mean, as you described, there's obviously benefits of this sort of sustained and recurring revenue from licensing of these technologies. On a kind of a bigger, grander picture scale, do you think this helps accelerate the sustainability agenda faster worldwide?
So we have a view in Xeros that the way we get sustainability more broadly deployed and more broadly received across the world needs three things. First thing that it needs is new technologies. The conventional technologies that we have been taken probably to the limits of their ability to become the most sustainable that they can. And so therefore, it being new technologies, unfortunately, they take a long time to develop and a long time to prove. The second thing that needs to change, and it is changing, is that consumers are beginning to vote with their spending patterns. And quite clearly, you know, we undertake market researches opposite our products, and we hear significant feedback that A, that they are demanded, but B, there is some price latitude from some consumers in terms of paying a little more, but I don't think we can assume that. The third thing is to have regulation, but there is no point in having regulation in the world's marketplaces unless there are practical and real supply solutions to meet those regulations. Now, to some degree, it can be a push and a pull, and certainly the EU has placed a responsibility on the washing machine industry, for example, to come up with solutions. And it has to be those three things working in combination. We think our technologies meet clearly the technological opportunity in terms of a better solution to bring about reduced input consumption. We know it meets consumer needs because we've asked them. And lastly, from what we see in terms of the legislative flow path, we're already at or ahead of what's going to be demanded. So I think they're the three areas, and I think we are in the right place to both drive and meet them.
Mark Nichols, CEO of Xeros Technology Group, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you very much.